the option that you're looking at for farmers to take on, and farmers telling me, we're busy enough, but we want something that'll work, but it's easy to implement. When you give the farmers encouragement and compliment them on what they've taken on, it's amazing how it blossoms and keeps going on.
It's great to be back with another Environment Edge podcast, and you're very welcome to the show. In part 2, we link up again with James McGlone, manager of Stranooden Group Water Scheme, and Teagasc ASSAP advisor Domhnall Kennedy, who are protecting water in County Monaghan.
Listen in to hear how the Stranooden Group are targeting measures such as nature-based solutions, closing cattle access points, installation of solar water pumps, and with a focus on rush control through weed licking.
I'm Cathal Summers.
And I'm Georgia Glenn.
Your Teagasc Sustainability Advisors. And we're back for another Environment Edge podcast number 102. Here we go.
James, what kind of mitigation actions did you put in place, or did the farmers put in place as part of the catchment management plan?
Look, it was mainly buffer strips, hedging and planting, in them buffer strips, getting cattle, sort of closing up drinking points or access points for cattle. And then bank revetment, as Domhnall has referred to, which is sort of riverbank repair. And it was always nature-based solutions was number one, what we were trying to use. It's soft engineering, so you weren't going in with the big diggers and the concrete. So these were the measures, and that was as well as that, a big sort of drive for the scheme was, because pesticides was such a driver of this, was to offer alternatives, to weed control. So we very quickly rolled out a free weed wiping service, and that sort of went down a treat because it was free and we were very busy. But we realised after year one that we were treating an awful lot of weeds that had never been treated and were never probably going to be treated. So we had to become a bit smarter, and the project did evolve and develop, as we sort of worked at it. So, we went very quickly from going in with a sort of a menu of sweets that, we'd go in and we'd ask a farmer for a 3 metre buffer. We quickly moved from that to going in and asking a farmer for a 3 metre buffer in the right place, and then a 1 metre buffer everywhere. So there's the right measure in the right place. And that's sort of the template that we work to now, and the same applied to the weed control. We originally started doing it for everyone. I suppose it was a useful exercise in that it got our word out that we were doing this, we were offering the service, and people became, got to know that Stranooden will treat your rushes or whatever particular weed you were after. We also offered a spraying service, but then we moved on and we decided to offer a sprayer calibration service. We would fit low drift nozzles, and we offer that service right up to this day. However, it is not free anymore. We charge for it because we felt that it took away the abuse of the service, and you got people who actually wanted to avail of it for all the right reasons rather than just because it was free. And yeah, we're busy at it. We now have a tractor and a weed wiper. And yeah, we're this time of year we're pretty busy at that. As I say, we continue to calibrate sprayers. We actually in some instances spray where there isn't the option to use weed wipers. So there was all sorts of measures rolled out during the project, and I suppose the project was pretty nimble like that because there wasn't a huge hierarchy of management. So if we saw something wasn't working, we could quickly, take an alternative.
You were very agile, James, I suppose.
Agile is.
Yeah, look, you talked about work that you did on banks and maybe protection of where the rivers are eaten into banks and that. Did you consult with IFI for that, or MPWS?
We did. Monaghan County Council.
How was your relationship? Because we have a fantastic relationship with both in Kilkenny and in different areas. And sometimes I think farmers are a little bit afraid of when they hear of IFI or they hear of parks rangers coming onto land. But they have a fantastic way of working with farmers as well. That's been my experience, I suppose. How did you find that?
Yeah, I concur with you, Georgia, on that. We have an excellent relationship with IFA as well. It should be said that the vast majority of people that I have met in AFA are, if not farmers themselves, are from farming backgrounds and are very much rooted in rural Ireland and are very aware of the pressures that modern farmers are under, and it's not insignificant, the pressures they're under. So they're not a scary organisation at all. They're in fact they're very helpful and have been very helpful. But obviously, they have a sort of an agenda of their own, and they have to sort of work to that agenda, and sometimes that can impede the works that you're doing for very simple reasons, like, for example, fish spawning times of the year and things like that you mightn't be aware of, that they'll make you aware of, and that you should be and need to be aware of if you're actually trying to make improvements. So we were in touch with all the relevant legislators and bodies that sort of give advice and oversee the quality of the water during any works that we were undertaking. As far as the measures that were being implemented, as far as riverbanks goes, it was to try and mitigate against riverbank erosion.
Erosion, yeah, it's a big problem, isn't it?
A big problem, because it was silting up and does silt up the sort of the riverbeds, which does away with the sort of the environments that's needed for many sort of the invertebrates that's in the water and fish species and all the rest. So the sort of the mitigation measures, what we were doing was, where there was severe erosion, there were several measures that we could use. One measure on sort of smaller streams or tributaries is willow spilling. So where you drive in vertical posts and then you sort of weave willow sort of in a lattice type arrangement between the posts. The willow actually take root and sprout and grow, and they sort of form the riverbank, and it's a live, living riverbank, and it takes a bit of maintenance to be cut back every 2 years, but the root system that the willow sort of
stabilizes the bank as well. Yeah,
stabilizes the bank and prevents that sediment being washed away. The other, and this was on bigger rivers, larger streams, was vertical, what we call horizontal logging. So you were driving in, we were getting logs from forestry, from forestry suppliers. We were driving the logs into the banks, or into the riverbeds, back at the bank edge, and then behind them logs we were putting vertical logs, and then stone behind that. So it was forming a sort of a wall of logs. And again, we were planting hedging at the back, on the riverbank, and the idea there is that the root system again of the plants and the whitethorn, the trees, will sort of hold that sediment and prevent it from washing away. But there's loads of other measures now, sort of soft engineering measures, where you can use brash, and there's other methods that can be put in place to prevent that sort of that sediment being washed down, which is taking phosphorus in, but is also silting up the essential gravels that's in the riverbeds.
We will have to go and visit them, won't we, Cathal?
Well,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, because some of the stuff you're talking about, particularly the willow one, and some of those constructions for the riverbank erosion, sometimes we shy away from it because it's a little bit complex, and you really, really need to know your stuff for putting them in. So I have to compliment you on that. It's excellent. Just a question going back to the herbicides again, and I know a lot of the measures that you have in place, you're trying to sort out the MCPA problem, because it's so soluble in water, and we can see it's the main problem with herbicides across the country. But did you try and encourage the mechanical route, maybe, or am I naive? Are the rush problems very strong? I know you're from a farmer background yourself, James.
When you say mechanical root, are you talking about sort of cutting or topping?
Yeah. Or other options rather than chemical.
Not so much cutting or topping, because the rush problem in certain areas is a serious one, and there's sort of they're very resilient. The rush, more resilient than the ryegrass in some cases. But no, it was to mitigate against, I suppose, spraying, because the spray and the issue of spray showing up in the drinking water was a particular problem, and it was the main driver of this project from start to finish, because the treatment plants can take out a certain amount, but it's not nearly enough. So if MCPA gets into the raw water, there's a really good chance it's going to be in the treated water. Whenever you pour your cup of tea or whatever. So no, we were always sort of focused on the spray rather than the rush, in that a farmer had a rush in his field. There's other issues, the pH level of the ground, or you know what I mean. There's how they actually manage the grassland, but it was the herbicide or the pesticide, should say, that was our main driver, and what we were trying to prevent from being sprayed. And our lads went and they done the various courses, so they were professional in how they went about even spraying, but we would be great advocates of the weed wiper. We really are. We're 6 years into this project now. We've been using weed wiper from year one. We were using it, as I say, just on the back of quads, which is slow, and it's difficult enough because a lot of the ground can be, it can be roughish, particularly even with heavy rush covers. It tends to make the ground rough. But we now, as I say, we use tractor and weed wipers, and the weed wiper really is, from the point of view of rush treatment and keeping sort of MCP out of the water, it really is the silver bullet. But as I say, the convenience of the sprayer tends to sort of win that battle,
Yeah, and Donald, just come back to you again. I know James was talking about that their source protection officers are kind of catchment scientists, but did you get a chance to feed in, I suppose, from your knowledge and experience of the advisory side of the house, those soft skills? Because James mentioned that even with the bags of money that you bring to the table, some farmers have found it hard to buy into the thing. Did you feed into that whole soft side skills that advisor bring to the table, where we can, I suppose, Teagasc have a good relationship with farmers anyway, but there's a lot more to it than that as well.
There is, and I suppose I would have fed into a certain amount there now. To take, for example, with James, I called with James, and I went through the ASSAP. I did an ASSAP visit with James on his farm, and I went down through and walked his land and looked at. Now James is a dry stock and poultry farmer, and we just looked at different metrics. We started in the farmyard, and then we walked around down to the water bodies. And I remember being on one bit of parcel of ground beside a water body with James, and I was putting in an idea now that has come through onto in the acres, is the extensively grazed pasture. I wanted something that we have now in the water EIPs, like the critical source area. I wanted an area further back, but I still wanted it maintained and easily managed. Any option that you're looking at for farmers to take on, and I'm listening to James and farmers telling me, we're busy enough, but we want something that'll work, but it's easy implement. And those skills, and I would have gone around where they put in the measures. I've been brought around by the source protection office and have met with the farmers that have taken on these measures. And when you give the farmers encouragement and compliment them on what they've taken on, it's amazing how it blossoms and keeps going on. But as James says, it is hard work.
James, if with phosphorus being a pressure, and you're chatting about bank erosion, and that's been part of our conversation there for a while, did you consider solar pumps as a management strategy?
Yeah, we did indeed, Deirdre. Yeah, we have 4 solar pumps in operation on different parcels of out farms mostly, where we were trying to get farmers to take cattle out of the river in particularly vulnerable areas and particularly impacted parts of the streams. So yeah, there was as I say, with 4 sites where we sort of went in. Now this was actually not part of the original project. This was where Stranooden Group Water Scheme sort of stepped up and put his hand in its own pocket. and said, right, this issue has to be cured. We went in, we closed it off, we used the bank revetment measures that we had used in other places to close off the drinking points, and then we installed solar water pumps to give the farmer, in each case, access to water which he previously had. And you can't go into a farm and ask any farmer to take cattle out of the river if that's the only drinking source they have, without providing an alternative. And in these particular cases, the solar water pump, ticked the box.
How do they operate, James? Can you tell me a little bit about the mechanisms behind them? Like, we have farmers in the Waters EIP that we're doing, myself and Cathal and Domhnall, and as part of it, they're financed up to a value of about 2,500. But how do they work? What's their power source? How much water can they intake? And what kind of mechanisms are on them, say, like to shut off, or is there a minimum distance from the trough to the water source, or from the pump to the water source? It's those sort of questions we're being asked. And I think you're in a very strong position to tell us, how do they work? Or are there some systems that work better than others?
They're actually quite simple, Deirdre. For anyone that has had any experience of water pumps in the past, even in their own normal applications on their farms, they're, number one, they're solar powered. So there's a solar panel on the unit. There's two types of solar pump. There's the submersible pump, and there's the normal, what we would call shallow well pump or surface water pump. The ones that we have in are surface water. The pumps that we have in are rated at 100. I think they're 100. The model number is 100, so they will pump 10,000 litres per day. The pumps that we have in also are rated to pump against a head of 20 metres, so they'll pump roughly about 60 feet high above from where they're situated. And the lift, I think it's about a 10-metre lift from the water source. I suppose the one wee thing we probably did do is we put liners into the river where we were situating the pump, because it's sort of, the liner give you a reservoir of water there, because they're in some of the rivers there's a danger of them sort of, I wouldn't say going dry, but getting very small. And if you sort of have that liner deep, which is about 4 foot deep of water, you sort of have a reservoir of water. But all these pumps also offer the facility where they'll run an electric fence for the farmer. And in all cases, these were out farms, where cattle were having to go from the furthest point of the farm back to this drinking point. And it meant that the farmer couldn't, have rotational grazing in place, or any sort of them sort of methods that they'd like to employ. Once the pump went in, it sort of meant that they could put drinkers in fields, they could pipe water to fields, they could have rotational grazing. And, they got much more return from their grazing by what they were getting previously. And it was something that some of them wouldn't have thought of, because they just took it for granted that the cattle were going to have to sort of go from the furthest point of the field to this drinking point. It's the way it always was. It was the way it was always going to be, because there was no power source. But now with the sort of installation of these pumps, they can see that, there's a possibility of getting more out of this farm,
So it gives them flexibility, and then they're able to improve the infrastructure, which will have a knock-on effect of improving the water quality as well.
Exactly.
Because they have opportunities with it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And did you grant aid that? And to what value would you?
Actually, in these particular instances, where the scheme, identified these as particular problems, the scheme actually bought the pump themselves. They put the pump out every sort of April. The pump operates all year, and come, we'll say, October time, the scheme goes and takes the pump back in and sort of houses it all winter. So it's the scheme's pump.
And is there much maintenance on it?
No, there's not. The way they work is the solar panel powers or charges a tractor battery. The tractor battery sitting there, and the tractor battery will operate the electric fence, and it will operate the water pump when, we'll say at dusk or early morning when there's not much sun. And then no, the maintenance, there's 2 or 3 parts that that we carry, because they're what go, and we sort of have it there in stock, so that if something breaks down, we can quickly replace them and sort of get them back up and running again. So no, they're not as maintenance free as allowing the kettle into the water, and that's and that's a criticism that is leveled at us. But at the same time, we're very quick to point out that you're now able to graze your farm the way you'd like to have been able to graze it, and previously you weren't. So there's a trade-off here, and in this case, it's a win-win for the farmer.
Yeah, it's great, because we see an awful lot of farmers putting them in here now in Kilkenny and all over the country as part of the EIP. So it's fantastic to see that they work and there isn't a huge amount of maintenance involved with them. But I suppose your message is they have to be taken down and put and housed for the winter as well. That'd be important.
Yeah, well, it sort of will take, for example, hard frost, so that it could burst them.
Damaged
they're
components.
much better.
Yeah.
They're much better sitting in.
James, a lot of really good work done between yourselves up there, and I suppose last question for you: is it successful? Is all your good work has it come to fruition?
I suppose the quickest set of results that you'd see is the pesticides, and in the lifetime of the project, we were able to sort of measure to a point where we could say that the pesticides were halved. Now, they're not eliminated, and we do have an occasional period where a lot of weather will allow a lot of people to go out and spray, and it's not just farmers; it's amenity spray, and it's where people spray around their house, and if the liter of dilute spray left over, and it's tipped into the spouting or the grating, it's all them things. But it's just, I wouldn't take on to say we have cured everything. We haven't. We're continuing sort of the battle to try and remove or keep sort of pesticides out of the water, and we have had success, but we can't stop, because we do have failures as well. On the phosphate side, it's a much slower a slower set of results to be able to achieve. You're talking about probably 10, 12, 15 years before you could actually say, yeah, there's a real improvement in the lake here. So it's very hard to quantify, but we're doing the right things, and we hope that in 10 or 12 years' time we'll be able to say, yeah, we can see an obvious improvement here. But from the pesticides point of view, you can measure that much quicker.
So there you have it. Tune in next time to hear more interesting chats and discussion.
Myself and Deirdre will be back in 2 weeks' time, but do give us a review on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to the Environment Edge podcast.